I am Abigail Carter, 32 years old, and never thought my greatest achievement would become the center of family warfare. My penthouse, purchased after years of 60-hour work weeks, became the unexpected battleground at my brother Carlos's wedding. What should have been a day of celebration turned into a nightmare when my parents cornered me between the cake cutting and first dance. Their demand was simple: give Carlos my home. When I refused, my father slapped me hard enough to leave a handprint on my cheek in front of 200 stunned guests. If you are watching this right now, let me know where you are from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button as I take you through the wedding day that forever changed my family. Growing up in Portland with my parents and younger brother Carlos was challenging, to say the least. Our household operated with an unspoken hierarchy, with Carlos permanently positioned at the top. 3 years younger than me, Carlos was the golden child, the son my father always wanted to carry on the family name. I was just Abigail, the daughter who would eventually marry and take someone else's name. From childhood, the preferential treatment was obvious. Carlos received the newest clothes, the latest gaming systems, and unconditional support for his hobbies and interests. Meanwhile, I was told to be practical, to lower my expectations, to understand that money did not grow on trees. When Carlos wanted to attend soccer camp, my parents found a way to afford it. When I needed new cleats for track, I was told to use my babysitting money. This pattern continued throughout our teenage years. My parents attended every one of Carlos's football games, cheering from the sidelines and celebrating each touchdown as if he had cured cancer. My debate competitions and track meets were often missed due to prior commitments, or simply forgotten altogether. Despite this imbalance, I worked hard in school, earning scholarships and maintaining part-time jobs to support myself. After high school, I attended the University of Washington, majoring in finance. My parents contributed nothing to my education, claiming they needed to save for Carlos's future college expenses. I graduated with honors, carrying $40,000 in student loans, but proud of my accomplishments. My professional journey began at a mid-sized financial services firm. I worked 80-hour weeks taking on projects nobody else wanted, volunteering for holiday shifts and building a reputation as someone who could handle anything. While my peers spent weekends partying or relaxing, I was at my desk, determined to create a future that belonged entirely to me. By 28, I had climbed the corporate ladder to become one of the youngest senior financial advisors at my firm. My client portfolio grew, and so did my income. When I turned 30, I made the decision to invest in real estate. After months of searching, I found a stunning penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering breathtaking views of the city skyline and Puget Sound. At $1.5 million, it represented every late night, every missed vacation, and every sacrifice I had made. When I signed those mortgage papers, I felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike anything I had experienced before. Throughout these years, Carlos had taken a different path. He dropped out of college after 3 semesters, claiming it was not for him. He bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. My parents rationalized his behavior as finding himself and continued to support him financially well into his 20s. Last year, Carlos met Heather at a friend's party. Heather was a kindergarten teacher with a sweet personality and seemingly endless patience, qualities that complemented Carlos's often impulsive nature. After dating for 8 months, they got engaged, much to my parents' delight. The engagement announcement coincided with Carlos losing his job at a local sporting goods store. Heather's teaching salary was modest, and they moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment that my parents helped furnish. When wedding planning began, my parents immediately offered to cover all expenses, despite their own modest retirement savings. The irony that they could find money for Carlos's wedding but not for my education was not lost on me. Despite our complicated history, I genuinely wanted to maintain a relationship with my family. I attended holiday gatherings, remembered birthdays, and made efforts to connect with Carlos and Heather. I even offered to host a small engagement dinner at my penthouse, which became an uncomfortable evening of my mother commenting on every design choice I had made, and my father repeatedly asking how much everything cost. As the wedding approached, I noticed an increase in comments about my living situation. My mother would casually mention how much space I had for just one person, while my father would remark that successful people should help family members who are struggling. I brushed these comments aside, attributing them to general family dynamics rather than any specific agenda. The week before the wedding, I helped with final preparations, addressing envelopes, picking up Carlos's tuxedo when he forgot, and attending the rehearsal dinner, where I gave a heartfelt toast to the couple. I genuinely hoped that this wedding might be a turning point for our family, an opportunity to heal old wounds and create new, healthier relationships with one another. How wrong I was. The wedding was scheduled for 4 p.m. at Lakeside Gardens, a picturesque venue overlooking Lake Washington. I arrived early, around 11 in the morning, to help with last-minute arrangements and support Heather with anything she might need. The venue looked magnificent. White roses and lilies adorned every surface, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling of the reception tent, and a string quartet practiced quietly in the corner. The spring weather had cooperated, providing clear skies and comfortable temperatures perfect for the outdoor ceremony. I wore a floor-length lavender dress, the color chosen by Heather for her bridesmaids. My hair was styled in an elegant updo, and I had splurged on professional makeup for the occasion. As I helped arrange place cards and floral centerpieces, I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the decorative mirrors. The woman staring back at me looked confident and successful, a far cry from the insecure girl who had grown up feeling second best. Guests began arriving around 3:30, and I took on the role of unofficial greeter, welcoming family members I had not seen in years. Aunt Patricia embraced me warmly, then held me at arm's length to examine me. "Look at you, Abigail," she said, her eyes traveling from my face to my shoes. "Such a successful career woman. Your own place in the city. No husband yet, though." Before I could respond, Uncle Robert joined in. "That penthouse of yours must have cost a pretty penny. Hard to believe you afford it all on your own." These comments continued as more relatives arrived. Cousin Amanda asked if I was still working those crazy hours, while her husband Gary wondered aloud if financial advising was really fulfilling in the long run. Each interaction carried an undercurrent of judgment, as if my success was somehow inappropriate or undeserved. Throughout these conversations, I noticed my parents keeping their distance, speaking in hushed tones with various family members who would then glance in my direction. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable, and it heightened my already growing anxiety. As the ceremony time approached, I made my way to the bridal suite to join Heather and the other bridesmaids. Heather looked beautiful in her lace gown, her face glowing with happiness and anticipation. I helped adjust her veil and offered sincere compliments, pushing aside the unease I felt about my family's behavior. "I am so happy Carlos found you," I told her, meaning every word. Whatever issues existed between my brother and me, Heather had been nothing but kind since entering our lives. "Thank you, Abigail," she replied, squeezing my hand. "It means so much that you are here today. Carlos talks about you all the time, you know. He really looks up to you." This comment surprised me. Carlos and I maintained a cordial relationship, but I had never sensed any admiration from him. Before I could ask Heather to elaborate, the wedding coordinator announced it was time to line up for the processional. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Standing at the altar as a bridesmaid, I watched my brother's face as Heather walked down the aisle on her father's arm. The love in his expression was genuine, and for a moment I felt a connection to the little boy who had once been my playmate before family dynamics drove us apart. My parents sat in the front row, my mother already dabbing at tears, my father sitting tall and proud. When the officiant asked who gives this woman to be married, my father stood with Heather's father and answered in a strong, clear voice. In that moment, they appeared to be the perfect parents, supportive and loving. After the vows and ring exchange during a musical interlude, I noticed my mother leaning over to whisper something to my father. He nodded, then turned slightly to look at me with an expression I could not quite read. It was not anger or disappointment, but something closer to calculation, as if I were a problem requiring a solution. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, I followed with one of Carlos's groomsmen, forcing a smile despite my growing discomfort. Behind us, I heard snippets of conversation between relatives. Such a shame about her living situation. Carlos deserves a proper start. The penthouse would be perfect for them. These fragments made little sense to me then, floating disconnected in the air, like soap bubbles, but they would soon coalesce into something much more substantial and threatening. The cocktail hour passed in a blur of champagne flutes and past hors d'oeuvres. I posed for countless photographs, my smile growing more strained with each click of the camera. Throughout it all, my parents continued their strange behavior, moving from group to group, engaged in what appeared to be serious discussions. As guests began moving into the reception tent for dinner, my cousin Sophia pulled me aside, her expression concerned. "I do not know what is going on," she said quietly, "but Aunt Diana and Uncle James have been talking about your penthouse to everyone who will listen. Something about Carlos needing it more than you do. It is weird, Abigail. Be careful." With those ominous words echoing in my mind, I entered the reception, unaware that the evening was about to take a dramatic turn that would forever alter my relationship with my family. The reception began like any other wedding celebration. The DJ announced the wedding party, and we entered the tent to applause and cheers. Carlos and Heather had their first dance to "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" My brother looking surprisingly graceful as he guided his new wife across the dance floor. Dinner was served, a choice of prime rib or salmon, accompanied by roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. As the meal progressed, it was time for speeches. The best man, Carlos's college roommate Derek, told humorous stories about their friendship and offered sincere congratulations. When it was my turn to speak as maid of honor, I kept my remarks brief but heartfelt, focusing on welcoming Heather to the family and wishing the couple happiness. Then my father stood up, tapping his knife against his champagne flute to gain attention. His speech started normally enough with anecdotes about Carlos as a child and expressions of parental pride. Then his tone shifted subtly. "Some people are blessed with natural abilities," he said, his gaze drifting to me. "They find success easily accumulating wealth and possessions. Others, like Carlos, have different gifts. He has always had the biggest heart, always thinking of others before himself. Material success is not everything after all. Family is what truly matters in this life." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The implication that my success had come easily rather than through years of sacrifice and hard work stung deeply. Several guests shifted in their seats, aware of the underlying criticism in my father's words. "Carlos and Heather are starting their lives together," he continued, raising his glass. "And I know that those who have been fortunate will step up to help them create the home they deserve. To the bride and groom." The toast was echoed around the room, but I noticed several people glancing in my direction, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. My cheeks burned with embarrassment as I realized my father had essentially asked me in front of 200 people to financially support my brother and his new wife. After dinner, as guests began to mingle and the dance floor opened, I retreated to a quiet corner, needing a moment alone to process what had happened. I was standing there watching Carlos and Heather laugh with friends when my parents approached, flanking me on either side, like prison guards escorting an inmate. "Abigail, we need to talk," my mother said, her voice pitched low but insistent, "about your brother's future." "This seems like an odd time for a family discussion," I replied, already sensing where this conversation was headed. "Should not we be celebrating?" "This is important," my father interjected. "It concerns all of us." They guided me toward a small antechamber off the main reception area, a room intended for the bride and groom to have private moments during the evening. My mother closed the door behind us, muffling the sound of music and laughter from the celebration. "Abigail," my mother began, her tone reminiscent of the one she used when I was a child being reprimanded. "Your father and I have been thinking about your living situation." "My living situation is perfectly fine," I responded, keeping my voice level. "That is just it," my father said. "It is more than fine. That penthouse of yours is excessive for a single woman. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, that huge terrace. What do you need all that space for? I blinked, stunned by the directness of the question. I work hard for my home. It is not excessive. It is what I have earned. My mother sighed dramatically. We always knew you were selfish, but this is beyond understanding. Your brother is married now. He and Heather will want to start a family soon. They need a proper home, not that tiny apartment they can barely afford. And you think, what? That I should give them my penthouse? The idea was so absurd. I almost laughed. It makes perfect sense, my father insisted. You are single. You do not need so much space. Carlos and Heather need to establish themselves. That penthouse would be perfect for them. They could raise children there, my mother added, as if this detail might convince me. Think of your future nieces and nephews. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. I sympathize with their situation, but my penthouse is not a solution. I can help them in other ways, perhaps with a down payment on a place of their own. My father's face darkened. That is not good enough. Carlos deserves that penthouse more than you do. He has always been the responsible one, the one who stayed close to family. The irony of describing my chronically unemployed brother as responsible was not lost on me, but I chose not to point this out. I am sorry, but the answer is no, I said firmly. My home is not available. Now, if you will excuse me, I would like to return to the reception. I moved toward the door, but my mother blocked my path. How can you be so heartless, after everything we have done for you? This statement stopped me in my tracks. Everything you have done for me. What exactly would that be? Paying for my college education? Oh, wait. You did not. Supporting my career choices? No, not that either. Perhaps you mean all those times you attended my track meets or debate competitions. Except, you rarely showed up. My words hung in the air between us, years of unexpressed hurt and resentment finally finding voice. My mother's face paled, then flushed with anger. We gave you life, she hissed. We raised you, put a roof over your head, food on the table, and this is how you repay us, by refusing to help your own brother. I have offered to help, I reminded her. Just not by giving away my home. My father stepped forward, his finger jabbing the air inches from my face. This is not a request, Abigail. This is what is going to happen. You will sign that penthouse over to Carlos and Heather as a wedding gift. You can find another place to live somewhere more appropriate for your lifestyle. The audacity of his demand left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it was steady and resolute. Number, I will not do that. The penthouse is mine. I worked for it. I pay the mortgage, and I decide what happens to it. This conversation is over. I turned to leave once more, and that is when my father grabbed my arm, spinning me back to face him. His grip was tight enough to leave marks, his face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. You listen to me? He growled. Family comes first. Always. If you walk out that door without agreeing to this, you are no daughter of mine. Do you understand? You will be dead to us. The threat hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. I looked from my father's furious face to my mother's cold, expectant expression. In that moment, I saw them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. This was not about Carlos's needs or my supposed selfishness. This was about control, about forcing me to submit to their will, regardless of the cost to me. I understand perfectly. I said, my voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside me. And my answer is still no. What happened next occurred so quickly that it seemed almost like a dream sequence, disconnected from reality. My father's face transformed from anger to pure rage, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. My mother stepped back, as if physically removing herself from what was about to transpire. You ungrateful little bitch, my father spat, the vulgarity shocking, coming from a man who had always insisted on proper language. After everything we have sacrificed for you. What sacrifices? I asked. A lifetime of suppressed questions finally breaking free. Name one thing you ever sacrificed for me. One opportunity you gave up, $1 you spent that you did not spend 3 times over for Carlos. My father's nostrils flared. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing, I corrected him. Everything I have, I earned myself. My education, my career, my home. You cannot take credit for any of it. My mother intervened then, her voice dripping with emotional manipulation. Abigail, think about what you are doing. This is your family. Blood is thicker than water. If you turn your back on us now, you will regret it for the rest of your life. I think what I will regret is not standing up for myself sooner, I replied. This pattern has gone on long enough. Carlos is an adult. He and Heather need to build their own lives just like I built mine. That is different, my father insisted. Carlos has always needed more support. He is sensitive. No, I shook my head. Carlos is entitled because you made him that way. You taught him that he deserves whatever he wants, including things that belong to other people. This statement seemed to push my father over some invisible edge. He took a step toward me, his fists clenched at his sides. You will do as you are told. The penthouse goes to Carlos. End of discussion. No, I repeated, standing my ground. Not now, not ever. My home is mine. The door to the antechamber opened then, and several guests entered, likely drawn by the escalating voices. Among them were my Aunt Patricia, Uncle Robert, and Cousin Sophia. Behind them I could see Carlos and Heather approaching, confusion evident on their faces. What is going on? Carlos asked, looking between our parents and me. My father turned to him, a sudden smile, replacing his scowl. Nothing to worry about, son. Just a family discussion about Abigail's wedding gift to you. Wedding gift? Carlos repeated, his brow furrowing. Your sister was just about to announce that she is giving you, and Heather, her penthouse, my mother said smoothly, as a start to your married life. The room had grown crowded now, with more guests filtering in, drawn by the unusual concentration of the wedding party, away from the reception. I could feel dozens of eyes on me waiting for my response. That is not true, I said clearly. I never agreed to give anyone my home. I am sorry if you were given that impression, Carlos. My father stepped forward, placing himself between Carlos and me. Abigail is just being difficult. She will come around. I will not, I stated firmly. And I would appreciate it if you would stop making promises on my behalf. How dare you embarrass us like this, my father hissed, his voice low but intense. In front of everyone on your brother's special day. I am not the one making scenes or unreasonable demands, I pointed out. All I want is to return to the reception and celebrate Carlos and Heather's marriage. Not until you agree to do the right thing, my father insisted. By now the small room was packed with onlookers. I could see Heather's parents near the door, their expressions concerned. The DJ's music thumped distantly, a bizarre soundtrack to the family drama unfolding. This is neither the time nor place for this discussion, I said, trying to diffuse the situation. Let us talk about it another day. There is nothing to discuss, my father declared loudly, now playing to the audience. Either you support your brother like a proper sister, or you admit that you care more about your fancy apartment than your own family. It was a deliberately false dichotomy designed to paint me as selfish regardless of my response. I took a deep breath, determined to remain calm despite the public humiliation. I love Carlos and Heather, and I wish them every happiness, I said clearly. But my penthouse is my home, not a bargaining chip or a gift to be demanded. I worked hard for it, and I am not giving it away, not to anyone. A murmur ran through the assembled guests. From the corner of my eye, I saw Carlos shift uncomfortably, but he remained silent, neither defending me nor contradicting our parents. My father stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. This is your last chance, Abigail. Agree now, or you are no longer part of this family. I looked him directly in the eyes. If your love and acceptance are conditional on me giving up my home, then perhaps we have different definitions of family. The slap came without warning, my father's hand connecting with my cheek with enough force to snap my head to the side. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot, followed by gasps and exclamations from the guests. My ears rang and heat bloomed across my face where his hand had struck. Time seemed to stop. 200 guests stared in shocked silence. My mother's hand covered her mouth. Carlos stood frozen, his new wife clutching his arm. And my father stood before me, his hand still raised, his expression a mixture of rage and something that might have been regret. In that crystalline moment of perfect clarity, I knew that something fundamental had changed. The invisible threads that had bound me to this toxic family dynamic had been severed with that single violent act. I straightened my spine, ignoring the stinging in my cheek, and looked directly at my father. Then, surprising even myself, I smiled. "You just lost me," I whispered, my voice soft but distinct in the silence. Without another word, I turned and walked through the parted crowd, head-high tears, threatening, but not falling. As I passed Carlos, our eyes met briefly. In his gaze, I saw confusion, conflict, and perhaps a flicker of shame, but no move to intervene or support me. I continued walking through the reception tent, where bewildered guests turned to watch my passage past the gift table, laden with presents for the brother who had stood silent while I was assaulted, and into the cool evening air where I finally allowed myself to breathe. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of voices, rising, the buzz of shock and gossip already beginning to spread. A wedding to remember indeed, though not for the reasons anyone had expected. I reached for my phone to call a rideshare, my hands surprisingly steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. As I waited for my car to arrive, I touched my cheek gently, feeling the heat of what would surely become a bruise. "Are you okay?" I turned to find Sophia standing beside me, her expression concerned. "Not really," I admitted, "but I will be." She nodded, understanding without need for further explanation. What they did was wrong. All of it. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, grateful for this small validation amidst the chaos. My car arrived, and as I prepared to leave my brother's wedding alone and injured, I realized that while this ending was painful, it was also a beginning. A beginning of a life untethered from expectations that were never meant for me, from a family dynamic that had wounded me since childhood. I slid into the back seat, gave the driver my address, and did not look back at the celebration continuing without me. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silent tears. By the time I reached my penthouse, my body felt leaden with emotional exhaustion. The bruise on my cheek had begun to darken, a physical manifestation of the emotional wound inflicted that evening. I kicked off my heels in the entryway and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that had first made me fall in love with this space. The Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky, beautiful and indifferent to human drama. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and finally allowed myself to break down completely. The sobs came from deep within, years of accumulated hurt finding release. I cried for the little girl, who had never been enough, for the young woman, who had worked herself to exhaustion, seeking approval that never came, and for the adult, who had just been physically assaulted by her own father at her brother's wedding. After what felt like hours, the storm of emotions subsided, leaving a strange emptiness in its wake. I moved to the bathroom, wincing at my reflection. The mark on my face was clearly visible, an angry red handprint that would be impossible to hide tomorrow. I carefully removed my makeup and changed out of my bridesmaid dress, hanging it in the back of my closet where I would not have to look at it. My phone, which I had silenced upon arriving home, showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I scrolled through them numbly. 3 calls from my mother with voicemails I could not bring myself to listen to yet. 5 calls from Carlos, along with texts ranging from, "What the hell happened to Mom and Dad are really upset," to, "You ruined my wedding night." The rest were from various family members and friends who had witnessed the incident, their messages reflecting a spectrum of reactions. Some expressed shock and support. "Abigail, what your father did was inexcusable. Call me if you need anything," from Aunt Patricia. "That was assault. Plain and simple. Are you okay?" From my college friend Allison, who had attended as my +1. Others took a different approach. You could have handled that more privately. Think about how Carlos and Heather must feel. From Uncle Robert. Your parents only want what is best for the family. Call them and apologize. From my grandmother. The most hurtful messages came from Carlos himself, who seemed more concerned with the disruption to his wedding than with the fact that our father had struck me in public. How could you make such a scene? Heather is crying. Mom is hysterical and Dad is talking about disowning you. Fix this. I turned off my phone, unable to deal with the onslaught of opinions and demands. Tomorrow would be soon enough to navigate these troubled waters. Tonight, I needed to process what had happened and what it meant for my future. Sleep eluded me, my mind replaying the confrontation on endless loop. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to rest, and instead made a cup of tea, curling up on my sofa with a soft blanket. As I sat there watching the night gradually give way to dawn, I realized something important for the first time in my life. I felt no obligation to make this right. The weight of family expectation, the constant need to appease and accommodate, had been lifted by my father's violent act. The next morning brought a fresh wave of messages and calls. My mother had escalated, from pleading to threatening, insisting that if I did not apologize to my father and agree to their demands, I would be cut off from the family permanently. Carlos continued his campaign of guilt, describing in detail how I had ruined the most important day of his life. I listened to one voicemail from my father, my stomach clenching at the sound of his voice. Abigail, your behavior yesterday was unacceptable. You provoked me, deliberately embarrassed your mother and me in front of our friends and family, and hurt your brother deeply. When you are ready to make amends and fulfill your obligation to this family, you may contact us. Until then, do not call, do not visit, do not send messages. You have made your choice. The breathtaking reversal of reality, casting me as the aggressor and himself as the victim, was so absurd that I actually laughed out loud, a harsh sound in my quiet apartment. Around noon, my doorbell rang. Looking through the peephole, I was surprised to see Heather standing there, still in her traveling clothes, her expression anxious. I briefly considered not answering, but curiosity won out. Heather, I said as I opened the door, should not you be on your honeymoon? Her eyes widened at the sight of my bruised face. Oh my God, Abigail, I had no idea it was that bad. What can I do for you? I asked, not inviting her in. She shifted uncomfortably. Carlos and I are leaving for our honeymoon this afternoon, but I wanted to see you first. To explain. Explain what exactly? Your parents, they told us about the penthouse weeks ago, she admitted. They said you had agreed to give it to us as a wedding present, that you were just waiting for the right moment to announce it. We were so grateful, Abigail. Our apartment is so small, and with my teaching salary, and Carlos still looking for the right opportunity. They lied to you, I said flatly. I never agreed to give you my home. Never even discussed it. Heather's face crumpled. I realized that last night when everything happened. Carlos does not believe me, but I told him his parents must have misunderstood or something. Or they deliberately manipulated the situation, knowing I would be publicly pressured to comply, I suggested. She looked down. Maybe. I do not know. I just wanted to say I am sorry for believing them, for not speaking up last night, for everything. What about Carlos? I asked. Is he sorry too? Heather hesitated. He is upset, confused. He says you have always been jealous of him, that you are punishing him for being the favorite. The statement was so backwards that I nearly laughed again. Interesting perspective. Is that why he stood by while our father assaulted me? He froze, she defended weakly. It all happened so fast. It certainly did, I agreed. Look, Heather, I appreciate you coming by, but I have nothing more to say about this. Enjoy your honeymoon. I wish you both well, but I need some distance from my family right now. Will you ever forgive them? She asked quietly. I touched my bruised cheek. That depends on whether they ever recognize what they did wrong. So far, all I have received are demands for my apology. After Heather left, I received an unexpected visitor. My friend Margaret, who had attended the wedding, arrived with lunch pain relievers and a frozen gel pack for my face. "I figured you could use some TLC," she said, setting up the food on my kitchen counter, "and someone to talk to, who is 100% on your side." Margaret's unwavering support opened the floodgates, and I found myself telling her everything, not just about the wedding incident, but about the years of favoritism, the emotional neglect, and the pattern of manipulation that had defined my family relationships. "I always knew your parents were a piece of work," Margaret said when I finished, "but this goes beyond typical family dysfunction. What your father did was assault Abigail. Have you considered filing a police report?" The suggestion startled me. "No, I have not. That seems so extreme." "More extreme than being slapped in the face at a wedding for refusing to give away your home," Margaret countered. "I am not saying you have to do it, but it is an option. At minimum, you should document your injury." Following her advice, I took photos of my face from several angles, noting the date and circumstances. Whether I would ever use these photos remained uncertain, but having them felt like a small reclaiming of power. Over the next few days, I established boundaries that would have been unthinkable before the wedding. I blocked my parents' numbers, temporarily needing space from their toxic narratives. I sent Carlos a brief message explaining that while I loved him, I could not maintain contact until he acknowledged the wrongness of what had occurred. His response, a text reading simply, "Whatever. Your choice confirmed. I had made the right decision." Not all family ties were severed, however. Aunt Patricia called to check on me, expressing outrage at my father's behavior and offering support. Several cousins reached out with similar messages, creating a small network of family members who recognized the dysfunction for what it was. The true value of friendship revealed itself during this period. Margaret, Allison, and my work friend Brenda formed a protective circle around me, taking turns, checking in, bringing meals, and providing distraction when memories threatened to overwhelm me. They listened without judgment as I processed the events of the wedding and what they meant for my future. "You know what the craziest part is?" I told Brenda over coffee in my kitchen a week after the incident. "Part of me still feels guilty, like maybe I should have just given them the penthouse to keep the peace." "That is how abuse works," Brenda replied gently. "It makes you question your right to basic respect and boundaries. But think about it. Objectively, would you ever demand that someone give you their home? Would you slap them if they refused?" Put that way, the answer was obvious. No, of course not. "Then why should you accept that treatment from anyone, even family?" she asked. "Especially family." Her words resonated deeply, helping to counter the lifelong conditioning that had taught me to prioritize others' wants over my own needs. Slowly, painfully, I began the process of recalibrating my understanding of family obligation and self-worth. The weeks following the wedding incident unfolded in a strange new reality, one where I was officially estranged from my parents and brother. The initial shock gave way to a complex mixture of grief, relief, and uncertainty about the future. The physical bruise on my face faded faster than the emotional wound beneath it. I returned to work after taking a few days off, using concealer to hide the lingering discoloration and offering vague explanations about an accident to curious colleagues. Only my boss Diana received the full story, as I needed to explain why I might need additional time off for personal matters. "Take whatever time you need," she told me, her expression sympathetic but not pitying. "And if you want my opinion, which you did not ask for, you did the right thing. No one has the right to treat you that way, family or not." Her validation meant more than she knew, reinforcing my growing conviction that I was not the one at fault in this situation. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received a formal letter from my parents, written on my father's business stationery, as if to add official weight to its contents. The message was brief and cold, stating that unless I reconsidered my selfish position regarding the penthouse, I would be removed from their will and considered no longer part of the family. The letter concluded with a deadline, 30 days, to comply with their demands. I read it twice, then placed it in a folder labeled Family Correspondence, creating physical and emotional distance between myself and their ultimatum. The old Abigail would have panicked, would have called immediately to negotiate, to apologize, to find some way to maintain family ties at any cost. The new Abigail recognized the letter for what it was, another attempt at manipulation and control. My response was simple and direct. I have received your letter. My position remains unchanged. I will not be giving up my home. If this means I am no longer considered family, I accept that consequence with sadness, but without regret. Their deadline came and went. True to their word, my parents initiated no further contact. Carlos sent occasional texts, mostly updates about their parents' health, designed to induce guilt, but never acknowledgement of what had happened, or his role in it. The silence from my immediate family created space for other relationships to flourish. I reconnected with Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who had always seemed to see me more clearly than my parents did. During a long lunch at a waterfront restaurant, she provided context I had never fully understood. Your mother was always jealous of your independence, she explained. The way you built your life without needing their approval or support, it threatened her somehow. But why, I asked, genuinely confused. Should not parents want their children to be independent? Aunt Patricia smiled sadly. In healthy families, yes. But your mother measures her worth by how much others need her. Carlos needed her financially and emotionally. You did not, and that was unforgivable in her eyes. This perspective shed new light on decades of family dynamics, helping me understand that my parents' behavior reflected their limitations, not my worth. Around this time, I made one of the best decisions of my life. I began seeing a therapist, a doctor. Eleanor Matthews specialized in family trauma and helped me navigate the complex emotions surrounding my estrangement from my parents and brother. What you are experiencing is a form of grief, she explained during one session. Even though no one has died, you have lost the family you hoped for, the parents you deserved but never had. It is normal to mourn that loss. With Dr. Matthews's guidance, I began to untangle the web of false beliefs that had shaped my understanding of love, worth, and family. I learned to recognize the subtle ways I had internalized my parents' criticism, the constant feeling that I needed to prove myself worthy of basic consideration. You did not cause their behavior, she reminded me often. You cannot control it and you cannot cure it. The only person you can change in this equation is yourself. This mantra became a touchstone as I worked to establish healthier boundaries, not just with my estranged family, but in all my relationships. I discovered patterns of people-pleasing in my friendships, of taking on too much at work to prove my value, of apologizing for needs and preferences that were entirely reasonable. Professionally, this period of personal growth coincided with new opportunities. My firm was expanding its high-net-worth client services, and Diana recommended me to lead the initiative. The role came with increased responsibility, a substantial raise, and the recognition I had long sought but rarely received from those closest to me. You were the obvious choice, Diana told me, when I thanked her for the recommendation. Your clients trust you implicitly because you are both competent and authentic. That is a rare combination. As summer turned to fall, I made another significant change. I redecorated my penthouse, replacing furniture and decor that had been chosen with my parents' theoretical approval in mind. The new design reflected my actual tastes: bold colors, abstract art, comfortable furniture that invited relaxation rather than formal entertaining. Each change, from the teal accent wall in my living room to the oversized reading chair by the windows, represented a small act of self-reclamation. This was my space, earned through my efforts, designed for my comfort. When I hosted a small housewarming to celebrate the redesign, the guests were people who genuinely cared about my happiness. My 33rd birthday arrived in October, the first I would celebrate without obligatory calls or cards from my parents. Instead of feeling sad, I planned a weekend trip to a coastal bed and breakfast with Margaret and Allison. Walking along the windswept beach, watching waves crash against rocky outcroppings. I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. "You seem different," Allison observed as we collected shells along the shoreline. "Lighter somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I have set down a heavy backpack I did not even realize I was carrying." "The backpack of parental expectation," Margaret suggested. "Heaviest thing in the world." We laughed, but the metaphor was apt. Without the constant weight of trying to earn my parents' approval, I moved through the world more freely, making choices based on my own values rather than anticipated criticism. One such choice came in early November, when Carlos reached out with news that our father had undergone minor surgery. The message carried an unspoken expectation that I would rush to the hospital, that a health scare would override the boundaries I had established. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Matthews, I sent a card expressing wishes for a speedy recovery, but did not visit. This decision, which would have been unthinkable before the wedding incident, felt right. I could wish my father well without subjecting myself to further emotional harm. Carlos's response was predictably accusatory. "I guess your fancy apartment means more to you than family after all." Rather than engaging with this distortion, I replied simply, "I wish Dad a full recovery. My boundaries remain unchanged. When you are ready to acknowledge what happened at your wedding and have a genuine conversation about our family dynamics, I am here." He did not respond, and I did not expect him to. The ball was in his court, and I was learning to live with uncertainty about whether reconciliation would ever be possible. As Thanksgiving approached, traditionally a time for family gatherings, I faced the prospect of my first major holiday alone. Instead of wallowing in isolation, I accepted an invitation to join Margaret's family for their celebration. Surrounded by her boisterous relatives, none of whom expected anything from me except to pass the cranberry sauce, I experienced a different kind of family, one based on genuine affection rather than obligation and control. By the 6-month mark after the wedding, the daily sting of estrangement had dulled to an occasional ache. I had built a life rich in meaningful connections, professional satisfaction, and personal growth. My penthouse, once the focal point of family conflict, had transformed into a sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my right to create boundaries and honor my own needs. One evening, standing on my terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I realized something profound. I was happy, not despite the rupture with my family of origin, but in part because of it. The painful break had created space for authentic joy to take root and flourish. 6 months after the wedding that changed everything, Seattle entered its rainy season. I had always loved this time of year, the gentle persistence of the rain, the way it transformed the city into a watercolor painting of grays and greens. Standing at my penthouse windows watching droplets trace patterns on the glass, I reflected on how much had changed since that fateful spring day when my father's hand connected with my cheek. The physical mark had long since faded, but the experience had permanently altered my understanding of family love and self-worth. Where once I had defined myself largely in relation to my parents' expectations and my brother's needs, I now recognized myself as a complete person, independent of those connections. My professional life continued to flourish. The high-net-worth client initiative I led had exceeded projections, resulting in a substantial year-end bonus and discussions about a potential partnership track. I had expanded my team, mentoring younger financial advisors, with an approach distinctly different from the cutthroat atmosphere I had navigated early in my career. "Your leadership style is refreshingly humane," commented Ryan, a recent hire who had quickly become one of our most promising advisors. "You manage to be both demanding and supportive. It is rare in this industry." His observation pleased me, confirmation that I was breaking unhealthy patterns, not just in my personal life, but professionally as well. The lessons learned through family trauma had applications far beyond those immediate relationships. My social circle had evolved too. While Margaret, Allison, and Brenda remained core supports, I had developed new friendships through a book club, a weekend hiking group, and a cooking class I had impulsively signed up for in September. These connections lacked the complicated history of family relationships, allowing for interactions based on genuine compatibility rather than obligation. The estrangement from my parents and Carlos remained in place. The promised removal from the family had been formalized via a terse legal notice from their attorney. Carlos had stopped even his occasional guilt-inducing texts, apparently accepting that his leverage over me had disappeared. Through Aunt Patricia, I learned that my parents had constructed a narrative in which I was the villain of the piece, ungrateful and cruel, while they were the long-suffering victims of my selfishness. "It is easier for them than facing the truth," Aunt Patricia explained during one of our monthly dinners. "Admitting they were wrong would require them to question everything about how they have operated as parents." "Does it bother you?" I asked. "The lies they tell about me?" She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Those who matter know the truth. Those who believe the lies never really knew you to begin with." Her wisdom resonated deeply, helping me release the lingering concern about family reputation that had been instilled since childhood. Dr. Matthews and I had reduced our sessions to twice monthly, focusing less on crisis management and more on long-term growth. During one particularly insightful conversation, she noted my progress in recognizing and interrupting old patterns. "When you first came to me," she observed, "you were still operating from a framework where your value was determined by what you could provide to others, particularly your family. How would you describe your framework now?" I considered the question carefully. "I think I understand now that my value is inherent. It is not earned through achievement or sacrifice or compliance. I matter because I exist, not because of what I can give or do for others." That, she said with a warm smile, is the most important lesson anyone can learn, and many never do. As the holiday season approached, I decided to host a small Christmas gathering in my penthouse, inviting friends who, like me, were separated from family either by distance or circumstance. Planning the menu, decorating a tree, and creating a welcoming space for others gave me joy that had nothing to do with obligation or expectation. 2 weeks before Christmas, I encountered Carlos unexpectedly at a downtown coffee shop. I had stopped in for a peppermint mocha after finishing my holiday shopping arms, laden with bags from local boutiques. He was alone at a corner table, staring at his laptop screen with the familiar furrow between his brows that indicated frustration. For a moment, I considered leaving before he noticed me. Our last interaction had been months ago, and it had not ended well. But something, perhaps the spirit of the season, or simple curiosity, made me approach his table instead. "Hello, Carlos," I said quietly. He looked up, surprise registering on his face. "Abigail, I did not expect to see you here." "It is a public coffee shop," I replied, with a small smile attempting to keep the interaction light. An awkward silence stretched between us, 6 months of unspoken words, creating an almost physical barrier. Finally, Carlos gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Do you want to sit? Or are you in a hurry?" I hesitated, then set down my shopping bags and took the offered seat. "How are you? How is Heather?" "We are okay," he said, closing his laptop. "Heather is pregnant, actually, due in May." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely happy for them, despite everything. "That is wonderful news." "Yeah, it is exciting. Scary, too." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from childhood. "We are still in the apartment. It is going to be tight with a baby." I tensed, wondering if this coincidental meeting was about to turn into another attempt to claim my penthouse. But Carlos surprised me. "Mom and Dad wanted us to move in with them," he continued. "They have the space, and they are eager to help with the baby. But Heather and I decided we need to figure things out on our own." This was unexpected. "That is a big decision." Carlos nodded. "Heather has been. She has been pretty clear about wanting boundaries with Mom and Dad, especially after what happened at the wedding." I remained silent, waiting to see where this conversation was heading. "I should have said something that day," he admitted, not quite meeting my eyes. "When Dad hit you, I should have stepped in, stopped at something. It was not quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. Why did not you? I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. He sighed deeply. Honestly, I was shocked, confused, and then I was angry not at Dad for hitting you, but at you for causing a scene at my wedding. It took me a while to realize how messed up that reaction was. And now? Now I think our parents have some serious issues, he said. The way they talk about you, the things they expect from both of us, it is not normal. Heather helps me see that. Her family is different. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Having outside perspective can be illuminating. They still talk about the penthouse sometimes, he admitted. How it should have been mine. How selfish you are for keeping it. I used to agree with them, but now it just sounds crazy to me. Why would anyone expect someone to give up their home? This shift in Carlos's perspective was significant, suggesting growth I had not anticipated. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating the complicated terrain of shared history and divergent experiences. He did not offer a full apology for his role in the wedding incident, and I did not push for one, recognizing that his acknowledgement of our parents' dysfunction was itself a major step. As we prepared to leave, Carlos hesitated. Would you want to meet Heather and me for lunch sometime? Nothing fancy, just to talk. The old Abigail would have jumped at this olive branch, eager to restore family harmony at any cost. The new Abigail considered the invitation thoughtfully, weighing genuine connection against potential manipulation. I would like that, I said, finally. But I need you to understand that my boundaries with our parents remain in place. I am not ready for a full family reconciliation. That is fair, he nodded. This would just be us. Heather has been wanting to talk to you anyway. We parted with tentative plans for January after the holiday rush. As I watched Carlos walk away, I felt neither the desperate hope for reconciliation that would have consumed me before, nor the bitter resentment that had followed the wedding. Instead, I experienced a calm acceptance. Whatever developed with my brother would unfold naturally, without the pressure of expectation. The Christmas gathering in my penthouse was everything I had hoped for, filled with laughter, good food, and the warm glow of genuine connection. As my guests exclaimed over the view, complimented the meal, and shared stories late into the evening, I realized I had created something precious, a chosen family bound by mutual respect and affection, rather than genetic obligation. Late that night, after everyone had left, and I was alone with a glass of wine, watching the city lights sparkle against the dark sky, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Carlos, a sonogram image of his unborn child accompanied by the words, "Your future niece, or nephew, Merry Christmas, Abigail." The simple gesture brought tears to my eyes, not from the old pain of exclusion, but from the possibility of a new, healthier chapter in at least one family relationship. I saved the image and replied with sincere good wishes for the holidays. As the new year approached, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. From the public humiliation and private pain of the wedding incident to the peace and self-assurance, I now felt the transformation had been profound. I had lost a family structure that had never truly served me, and gained a deeper understanding of what family could and should be. My penthouse, once the focal point of conflict, had become a symbol of my independence and self-determination. Each morning when I woke to the sunrise over Puget Sound, each evening when I returned from work to my carefully curated space, I experienced a quiet joy in the knowledge that this home was mine, earned through my efforts, and defended through my courage. The most valuable lesson of this difficult chapter was perhaps the simplest: true family, whether biological or chosen, supports your growth rather than limiting it, celebrates your success rather than resenting it, and respects your boundaries rather than attempting to override them. Love that demands the sacrifice of your self-worth is not love at all, but control disguised as affection. As I stood on my terrace on New Year's Eve, watching fireworks illuminate the Space Needle and listening to the distant sounds of celebration, I made no resolutions for the coming year. Instead, I acknowledged how far I had already come from a woman who measured her value through others' approval to one who recognized her inherent worth. The journey had not been easy, and certain wounds might never completely heal. But in finding the courage to stand firm in that moment at the wedding, to whisper, "You just lost me and mean it," I had gained something precious myself, whole and uncompromised. If you have ever experienced family dynamics like the ones I have described, know that you are not alone. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary for well-being. Your worth is not determined by what you can provide to others, and love should never come at the cost of your dignity. If this story resonated with you, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure? How did you handle it? Click the like button. If you found value in my journey, subscribe for more stories of overcoming family challenges, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family you create is more nurturing than the one you were born into.